As Venus, the planet of love, beauty, harmony, the goddess, female energy, as she entered Virgo on Thursday, July 9th, 2026, she begins a series of connections in the sky that indicate that even in her fall in Virgo, where she's not very comfortable, there's an intense healing experience that is available to us in matters of relationship, beauty, harmony, self expression, and the places where we feel insecure about our safety and survival needs, as well as our sense of well being in our physical bodies. As I said, Venus is not at ease in Virgo because Virgo represents the time of the decline of the light. And Venus is all about fullness and the lush and the sensual and the expansive. So here in the Western tropical zodiac system, Virgo is out of sync with those Venusian archetypes when Venus is there, because Virgo is more focused on purity and editing, curating the details and sometimes perfectionism, which Venus cannot be bothered to attend to as she, eats her grapes basking in a conch shell or something. But because Venus immediately makes a trine to a brand new Chiron in Taurus at 0 degrees 35 minutes on Friday the 10th, there's something really special about this transit of Venus in Virgo that is going to allow us to identify the places where we can be critical, hyper-focused, perfectionistic, and even nitpicking of ourselves and others in relationships, particularly when it comes to finances, assets, and the material world. We're much more likely now to be able to find beauty, harmony, pleasure, enjoyment, and healing in the simple things in life. That's Taurus, where Chiron resides currently. So let's explore more about the potential for this transit of Venus and what it will look like in our lives, particularly around love, romance, and self-love. Hi, I'm Amy Rose White. I'm an integrative psychotherapist and counseling astrologer, making videos on self-healing tools that align with the cosmic rhythms and astrological transits. Be sure and see below the links to my free resources, my Chiron and Taurus healing kit, and the links to book with me. So the next day following that Venus trine to Chiron and Taurus, on Saturday the 11th, Venus in Virgo then opposes the North Node in Pisces, symbolizing these faded relational dynamics that are at play here, particularly for a Venus that's actually here to make some remarkable changes around the pressure she puts on herself and others to be perfect in a relationship, or to have enough, or to make it good enough, or create enough, or even just making enough money, but in a very specific way. There's a more receptive healing quality with the opposition to the North Node in Pisces, where dreams and imagination, mystery, intuition, artistry, and Taurus, where Chiron is, simple pleasures are symbolized. And in that way, relationally, basic needs are much more important and emphasized at this time. Interestingly, the ruler of Venus's opposition to the North Node of Pisces and her trine to Chiron and Taurus is Mercury. Her whole experience in Virgo is ruled by Mercury, which, as you know, recently stationed retrograde and then has its Cazimi moment on July 12th, which is the beginning of a whole new synodic cycle where Mercury has a conjunction with the Sun, or a very special visit with the king, metaphorically, in the sky, and becomes renewed in that process. So it's a brand new Mercury ruling this Venus in Virgo. It's like if the president of a country just had gone on a spiritual pilgrimage and meditated in a sacred temple with a very well-renowned guru for 24 hours. And when they came back, they might be, hopefully, in a more clear, centered, empowered, and even visionary state to be of service from that place and to be clear. So there's something about reviewing the past and maybe even themes of the past returning in a renewed way with new eyes that is also fated because of that opposition to the North Node. And that may signify a return, a review, or a reconnection perhaps to people and dynamics where we are ready to show up differently or others are ready to show up differently. Now, I am not trying to give you the opposite advice that everyone tells you about don't get back together with your ex and don't text your ex during Mercury retrograde. But this weekend in particular might bring people from your past into your phone, into your emails, your DMs. They might just randomly walk across the street right in front of you in a way that brings healing and a perspective change. And that might be on the past dynamic that you had with this person. And it could also be with family members. It doesn't necessarily mean romantic partnership. It might mean female friendships, sisters, that's Venus. It might be a reflection or a different or a new lens on how we defined love before and how we define love now, and what we find pleasing and what we need in relationship. That's Venus. Because Chiron and Venus together in that trine want us through that trine energy to facilitate a release of self-criticism, self-judgment, and in so doing, release some of those harsh edges that can be Venus in Virgo that we can project onto each other in our relating. And not just in our intimate partnerships, as I said, but our friendships. And for Venus, that's often with our mothers, our sisters, women in our lives. So remember that when folks, if they do come back from the past, certainly there are fated love stories of people reconnecting from high school 30 years later. And I do believe that destiny brings people together that way, and it's possible that it can happen during Mercury retrograde, but there's usually information that isn't clear. Unless you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, then these kinds of reviews and revisits and reconnections might be more aligned for you. That's true for Venus retrograde as well, which gets a bad rap for romance. It's less about necessarily interpreting someone coming back as fate stepping in, and we get this message in our heads of like, we're actually supposed to be with that person, or whatever kind of relationship that symbolizes for you, but more about having this new way of thinking. That's the Mercury Cazimi, ruling Venus and Virgo, this new perspective, this kind of enlightenment or a change of mind in a way, because there's so much truth being revealed energy at this time, that we can just see ourselves and others much more clearly. That doesn't mean we have to make other people bad or wrong or ourselves right or wrong, but we can see more easily what is actually effective and working in relationships in our lives, where we're reminded of these threads of karma that link us all simultaneously together. And we can kind of chuckle at the universe for reminding us at this time, Mercury retrograde, Venus in Virgo, that it doesn't necessarily mean when folks come back we need to make decisions or reach out to people or commit or further deepen connections. I often think that retrogrades are the divine's way of simply reminding us that we are in this interconnected web that we cannot visually see when we're changing diapers, making dinner, driving to work, paying bills, and getting mad at people on the freeway. The synchronicities that happen when a personal planet is in a new sign during a retrograde like Mercury, particularly when these personal planets are involved, they're kind of a nudge to me to reconnecting with the divine, to laughing at how silly it is that we forget that we have this cosmic support and that there's this interconnectedness of all things at all times. Even when we're experiencing great grief, tragedy, and loss, that web is still here for us. That trine that Venus makes to Chiron is likely to feel more like a soft brush on the cheek or a pat on the head or a wink from the universe, or even just like a complete blessing that is in disguise. Maybe you get into a fender bender, which would be a classic Mercury retrograde, but you happen to take the car to a body shop where the manager is someone you knew in college and they give you a great deal. Things like that can actually be very healing. People, connections, and love symbolically, kindness, support, compassion, like altruism, the sense that angels are around us during this retrograde. So expect good fortune at this time based on all these planetary angles that are forming at the same time. Venus goes into Virgo and her ruler is in retrograde because all the outer planets are right now in harmonious relationships as well. So to further highlight the radical changes that a brand new Venus in Virgo is experiencing, even though she is uncomfortable there, she then squares Uranus in Gemini at 8 minutes on Monday the 13th. So this aspect adds a fiery, dynamic Venus in Virgo journey that's unfolding before us in our lives. And as I've said many times, remember, Venus is a personal planet. So although the personal planets will quickly change, they move quickly, and their effects might not be always radical or felt for as long as the outer planet transits are, they are significant, and we do notice them in our day-to-day interactions during a Mercury retrograde, especially This can bring sudden, unexpected events and communication and thoughts, ideas, and in the way we relate to our work and how we serve in the world and what we devote ourselves to. That's very Virgoan. And Venus, where we overdo it, Virgo, and sacrifice, Virgo, ourselves. So the square to Uranus is likely to break karmic patterns where that dynamic has showed up in just really unhealthy ways, where it's drained or depleted us or led to bitterness, maybe resentment and passive aggressive behavior. Maybe in a relationship where we say yes when we really mean no, or we do too much for someone because we secretly hope that we'll get the same in return. Venus squaring Uranus in Gemini is really likely to give us freedom from those old mental habits where we were stuck in those patterns, not knowing what else to do, or maybe believing one day something would change and it would finally work. All that self-sacrifice and martyrdom might finally pay off. The Venus square here will make it really clear that's never going to happen. And now we have a choice. What are we going to do next in light of that revelation? It's also an excellent time to focus on health and the signs that our bodies give us on how it feels, with what we're eating, for example. I know for me, I recently got back to consuming sugar in these last few weeks. Any of my perimenopausal friends out there might understand that even the most disciplined, I do have a Sun in Virgo, person around healthy food might tend to regress at certain hormonal times. And while the ruler of this Venus in Virgo is in Cancer in retrograde, ruled by the moon, we're likely to feel fluctuations because that ruler is in the sign ruled by the moon, which has a lot of changes. That can be moods, that can be hormones, that can be inner states, that can be mental health. So taking care and focus on how we eat, how we take care of ourselves, what our routines are, what we engage in or don't engage in, what are supportive or what are needing review at this time is really important. And although sometimes there's missing information from blood work and testing and things during a Mercury retrograde, again, if the timing lines up, if you're having something going on with your body, going back to someone you used to see or saw a long time ago. So reviewing old reports, going over old information, going back to dietary changes you've done before, that's Chiron and Taurus and Venus and Virgo working really well together. So supported at this time. What I want you to see as the unifying thread behind all these different things that I've discussed today that aligned with this Venus and Virgo journey, as we've got so many different planetary movements working together at one time. It's actually been difficult for me to intuit a single focus for my videos lately, so you've probably seen in this one for sure. But the point is to bring a softening and a gentle compassion and curiosity, that's Mercury, rather than a rigid, dogmatic, or an overly critical eye that can be the lower octave of Venus and Virgo to ourselves and others at this time. And to know that although it might feel like a bit of a struggle, we're about to have, when this transit is finished in a month or so, a Venus that goes into Libra, where she's in domicile, very happy to be there and strong. So, for example, rather than berating myself, as it was easy for me to do for buying candy several times in the last week, I've just been telling myself today, because I can see in my body what happens when I do that, that's not serving me. We start again today. We start fresh today. Why don't you go cook and bake some sweet potatoes? I had a random neighbor who was visiting in town bring me some sweet potatoes today, and I just tossed them right in the oven to satisfy my sweet tooth and to better nourish myself. Because for me, when I crave sweets, this is very Venus, it can mean that I'm undernourished. I'm busy, I don't have a lot of time or an appetite in the summer. It's hot, I haven't been preparing food first thing in the morning like I usually do, so that I have healthy, good, nourishing meals to reach for before I'm at the supermarket walking past the candy aisle. So this is a time to really focus on service to self and healthy, loving, non-restrictive ways. Notice I didn't determine to cut out candy. I focused on where I could add more nourishment that I happen to love, like sweet potatoes, but actually feel good to me. I also have some bananas that I can caramelize in rice paper and put cinnamon on with a little bit of honey, maple syrup. And this is what Venus and Virgo, in a very mundane way, could inspire us to do. So if your fated love returning is more about this, that's good. It doesn't have to be a person. So your meditation for this transit is, what does that harshest critic in my head say? What is that harsh critic in my head telling me is true? And how could I help that part serve me in a more loving way? Your mirror work for this transit, straight spine, deep breath. Look into your left eye in the mirror. Take some time here. You're worthy just as you are, and perfection does not exist. And your mantra for the transit is, I savor the simple things and am in service to self-love. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing, for subscribing, for hyping the video. Thank you so much for the kind comments recently. I truly appreciate them. I read every single one. If you like this video, you'll like these above, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.